Hey everyone, this is my talk, Surviving and Thriving in the Freezing Cold. It's a introduction to winter camping that should be hopefully very approachable for everyone. Like most introductions, I'm going to cover the what, why, where, and how of winter camping. I do want to say up front that cold can kill, so it's really important that you practice at home in your backyard, maybe go out with a friend who's more experienced, start with car camping before you get into the backcountry. It's very important to manage your risk as you build up your skills. So let's start with the what. This talk is, of course, about winter camping. You might ask yourself why you would want to go out and sleep in a snowbank. This particular picture was with some friends at Killarney Provincial Park. There's a couple of different shelters you can see here. A cold tent, a hot tent, which is the white tent with a chimney coming out of it, and then the ice hut. My friend also had a propane heater in that one. But there's many different choices, and we'll talk about those as we go throughout the talk. But why might you do this? And I know what you're thinking, right? This hardly looks like an inviting Caribbean beach. It looks cold, it looks windy, it's kind of gloomy. The colors are a little bit muted and cool. But the thing is, there's no bugs and there's no crowds. And the beauty is awe-inspiring. It's incredible to see a different side of nature, an incredible feeling of accomplishment and empowerment when you know you can go out into, a harsh environment and survive and thrive. This picture is from late November, not quite full on winter, but getting pretty close. Because you can see it's magical, the mist coming off the lake. Quiet, it's just you and the birds and the animals. Not really much in the way of bugs at this time of season. And glass-like water, you can see the cloud reflected off of it. A magical time to be out in nature. One of the nice things when you go out with other people is the chance to build friendships and community. So you're going to get exercise, but you get to do it with other people that have things in common with you, things that you are both interested in. This one always makes me laugh. Like when you're going to take a selfie or a picture and I'm around and you say, whatever you do, Andrea, don't make a funny face. Of course I'm going to make a funny face. As I said, friendships are just a really good part about going out into nature. You'd think that we were suffering immensely and we're, shivering and cold, but the reality is inside the hot tent it's cozy and warm, and we're eating tasty food, and we're laughing and goofing around, and just connecting with each other, and in some cases just spending time together, maybe not even talking, maybe we're reading a book or hanging out. And so it's really good. It's food for the soul. So where do you go to go winter camping anyway? I'm going to use some pictures from Ontario parks. I hope they don't mind. There's obviously many different places you can go. So the parks in Ontario, national parks, the CPAC parks in Quebec, Crown land, conservation centers. Even if somebody's got a cottage that maybe you have access to in the winter, that could be a place where you could do winter camping. So I'm just going to step through some of the Ontario parks and give you a sense of what's open in the wintertime. So there's different sections. I'm going to use my mouse. The Northern Park section is up here. There's the near north, between Sudbury and getting down to Algonquin. There's the southeast east parks, so sort of in the Ottawa area, almost getting to the northern the Quebec border and almost getting towards Montreal. And then there's the southwest and central parks. There's not a lot that's open in the wintertime in the southwest and central, so I'm mostly going to be concentrating on the other areas. So here we see in the north, Quetico is a great place to go. Quetico is quite a large park, and so you can sled in. It's not a bad idea to wait till the lakes and creeks are frozen, and that way you can use them as a highway to slide across. You're not going to see a lot of people there. In fact, you may actually, on most occasions, have the park to yourself. And the other thing about it in Northern Ontario is there's plenty of Crown land. So this is land that's held in trust for all of us by the government. And there'll be many side roads and in some cases logging roads, but you got to be careful. Make sure that you're parking somewhere that is safe and that you're allowed to. And also you want to be careful about leaving no trace. So if you establish a campsite, or maybe if you're using an existing campsite, don't leave any garbage, and be very responsible about a fire. Don't leave anything going or accidentally start a forest fire. The winter time's a little bit more safer for forest fires, but you just want to be responsible about how you do things. In the near north, Killarney Provincial Park is excellent. It's sled in the wintertime, so you would drive to the Killarney parking lot, and then you'll load your gear onto sleds. They actually have sleds you can borrow, or you can bring your own. Arrowhead Provincial Park is also open. My sense, actually, I've not gone there in the wintertime, but my sense is there's not a large number of campsites, and I think their reservations are fairly last minute. So you'll just have to check that out. The other one I have done actually is Killbear. So Killbear is now open in the wintertime, and it's beautiful, and it's got a comfort station that's winterized and open in the winter as well. There is a comfort station open in Killarney, although it's not right in the campground. It's sort of more to the entrance of the park. Once again, there's lots of crown land around in this area. Algonquin Provincial Park, there's really two main options. So if you want a car camp, there's Mule Lake Campground, and it has a heated comfort station. Also, there's the backcountry. So if you're willing to sled in or backpack in, there's a number of entry points in which you can go into the backcountry and set up your campsite. In the eastern part of Ontario, in Frontenac is a backcountry only park. Now, that can be a little bit misleading in the sense that there are some sites that are just a few hundred meters from the parking lot. So it's not particularly onerous backpack or slide in, but that's one thing to know. And again, there's crown land options. And in fact, there's one between Frontenac and Ottawa that I have gone to. But this is one of the tricky parts to see what's open. A lot of small towns, you're not allowed parking at the side of the road in the wintertime. There's snow clearing ordinances that means you could be ticketed or towed, and so you want to be careful about that. Oftentimes getting to the park is one of the funnest parts, and I mean that sarcastically. It can be a little bit challenging if you're going through bad weather. In this particular case, I was headed to Algonquin, I think it was, and it wasn't too bad at this point in time. About maybe a half an hour later, you could barely see the road. So I'll just show you what that looks like. Hopefully a fun game we call Find the Road. So let's now talk about gear. Before I dive into gear, I want to talk about how energy is transferred. There's conduction, convection, and radiation. And this is how energy is transferred through touch, in the case of conduction, through a medium like air or water, in the case of convection, or radiation. And obviously the sun gives off radiation as well as a campfire. So a campfire will give off infrared radiation, and that's what makes us feel warm. The reason I talk about how energy gets transferred is because your body does not have enough energy to warm up the ground. The ground is almost an infinite heat sink. So you can see this picture. They have a closed cell foam on the bottom that's touching the ground, and then they have an inflatable sleeping pad, and then they have their sleeping bag, and then they're going to have some clothing on as well. What this combination does is it keeps the heat from your body from being leached away into the ground. That will keep you warm from the bottom, and then your top layers, like your sleeping bag, your quilt, any blankets that you have, the loft of the sleeping bag or the loft of the quilt will hold the heat in as well. Now, the nice thing about insulation is it's additive. So as always, you're going to want to use layers. An R value is a measurement of a material's ability to resist heat. An R value of at least 6 to 8 is what you're looking for. So R6, you'll be okay, and then R8, you'll be warm in even more extreme conditions. This sleeping pad is one that has an R value of 8.4 to 9, depending on exactly which model you're buying. It can keep you warm on snow and ice just by itself. And if you add the closed cell foam on the bottom, that's just an R value of 1. So all told, this person has probably a value of almost R10 underneath them. And then if they've got a good top layer, like a top layer down quilt or sleeping bag, maybe a synthetic sleeping bag, they'll be plenty warm, even in the coldest of conditions. As I mentioned earlier, the shelter's job is to keep the precipitation and wind off of you. This particular tent is a Gossamer Gear the One. It's a ultralight backpacking tent that I have. I've used it in winter conditions on a few occasions. It works just fine. What's nice about this one is it's small and light, and you can basically just throw it in a backpack. Now, on a sled, it'd be no problem at all, but you can even throw it in a backpack and just go for a walk. With a warm sleeping pad and a warm down quilt or a synthetic sleeping bag or down sleeping bag, you're going to be plenty warm in it. Once again, the shelter's job is to keep the precipitation off of you and keep wind off of you. One of the nice things about this one is it's got plenty of ventilation, which helps you deal with condensation. If the inside of your tent is warmer than the outside and your breath has lots of moisture in it, the moisture in your breath will condense on the inside of the tent. Now, on your tent, maybe it's not that big a deal, but you definitely don't want it condensing on the down of your sleeping bag or quilt, as the materials in your down quilt or sleeping bag get wet, they'll clump, and they don't resist heat as well. They need that loft, that poof, in order to stay warm. This is my hammock. This was made by Little Shop of Hammocks, which I highly recommend. You'll see there is an underquilt. This is the poofy bit that's underneath the hammock. What that does is it keeps your back, your shoulders, your legs warm. And then if you look into the hammock, you'll see a shiny thing in there. That's my top quilt. Both the underquilt and top quilt in this case are rated to -17. And so up to, -17 cold conditions, I can go in there and be plenty cozy and warm. And I can even, if I want, I can add a little additional layering, like a warm sweater, maybe a hot water bottle, and I can take this down to colder temperatures. I've had it down to -28 and been okay. The next thing I'm going to show you is, so I take my hammock and my underquilt and top quilt, and I put them under a tarp. The red tarp in the background, that's what keeps the snow and wind and rain off of me, and so I'm nice and cozy in there. This particular tarp has flaps that you can close. They're called doors. And it gives you the ability to shelter from the wind in all 4 directions. And so when you're in there, it's just like being in a tent. And of course, then I'm in my cozy down burrito in the hammock. In the foreground here, this is Stabby the narwhal. Stabby the narwhal is my tea infuser, and Stabby is a bit of a ham, likes to mug for the camera when I'm in various places. This is a hot tent. This particular hot tent is a Snow Trekker base camp. It's made of canvas, and it has a steel wood stove. And what that means is that you can actually have a fire in your steel wood stove and warm up the inside of the hot tent. It can easily keep the inside of the hot tent, 20 degrees, 25 degrees. And if you really wanted to, you could make it like a sauna in there if you felt like it. The other thing that's nice is in the wintertime, you can actually cook inside your hot tent. And I'll show you more about that in a second. So the hot tent does not have a floor. And so I'll show you in a moment how I set up a floor for the hot tent, what kinds of flooring options there are. But yeah, you can just basically set this up anywhere there's a nice flat space. There are various techniques to anchor the tent. In this case, I have big steel tent pegs. They're kind of like big nails. A lot of people will actually use steel nails. So they get, sort of 9-inch, 10-inch nails from the hardware store. They're very cheap, and just basically hammer them into the snow or ice or ground. You can also, if you want, you could do something called a dead man anchor. And so what you'll do is you get a stick or even, a tent peg, but a stick is a good way to do it. And you'll wrap your paracord, basically the orange cord you see there that secures the side of the tent. You'll wrap it around the peg, and then you'll put the peg on the ground sideways, and then you'll pile snow on top of it and pack it down. And it'll just hold it for a minute because the snow will sinter, it'll freeze, and it'll become quite solid. And so if you do that, you can have a really good anchor point, and then you don't even need to hammer into hard ground or ice. But I've got several different techniques to do this. And the nice thing about it when you're doing a dead man anchor is that, if you need to, just get a bigger stick and cover it up with more snow. And so you can actually have a really, really solid anchor point. In the hot tent, of course, this is the star of the show. This is what it looks like when the wood stove is going. So I'll just show that. It was quite mild, and so I only had a small fire going in the fireplace, but I can actually load it up with wood and have it go for a few hours. Now, in this case, I was going to have it dampened down just to reduce the rate of burning, so it'll burn for longer. Next, I want to talk about clothing. A big part of camping in the winter and just really enjoying outdoor sports in the wintertime is having the right clothing. This is that picture I showed early on with my friends, and I wanted to introduce two concepts, hydrophilic and hydrophobic. So hydrophilic means something attracts water and really likes water and it will hold on to it, and then hydrophobic means it generally repels water. Cotton is a great example of something that's hydrophilic. So if it will attract water and absorb it very easily, and then if it gets wet, it stays wet, and it doesn't dry out very fast. And then hydrophobic might be like a synthetic polyester, or actually wool is not too bad in terms of its hydrophobic properties. So for this reason, you'll often hear the term saying cotton kills, so don't wear cotton when you're going out in the winter. This is the reason why that is. Now, remember, we talked about how energy is transferred. So there's convection, which is, the shifting of air, or, say shifting of water if you happen to be water, but really it's the shifting of air. And then there's also conduction, which is you're touching something. When you are wet, you are changing the heat transfer from convection, which is not all that efficient with air. There's not a lot of air molecules. They're pretty loosely packed. And when you're wet, the water molecules are much more close together, and they're much more efficient at transferring heat. So for that reason, when you're wet and damp, and if your clothes get wet and you stop exercising and producing heat, you're going to get cold very, very fast. So it's really important to switch into dry clothes, or if you can, wear wool, alpaca, or synthetics. Now, one of the nice things about wool and alpaca over synthetics is they don't retain odor as well, so they're antibacterial naturally. And so generally, you can wear a wool outfit pretty much the entire weekend, and you won't stink. Maybe if you push it a little longer. I think I've had wool outfits on for 4 days and 5 days, and they'll get a little bit stinky, but not nearly as bad. If you wear synthetic, by the sort of not even 24 hours, you start being stinky. This is my friend Christine and I. The picture was taken by my friend Sonia. So we're showing sort of mix and match portions of traditional and modern outdoor winter equipment. So I'm wearing an anorak, which is a traditional winter top layer. So in my case, it's a canvas anorak. And so what the canvas does is it blocks the wind and protects you from the moisture. So it's pretty good. It's not fully completely waterproof, and you don't want it to be fully and completely waterproof because you want it to breathe. So if you sweat, you want the sweat to go from your base layer, the clothing touching your skin, and move towards the outer layers and be absorbed into the canvas, which is really just a densely woven cotton, and then be dissipated out to the environment. So canvas is quite good at that. I have a fur ruff, and I'll talk more about that in a second. Now, in my case, I'm wearing modern boots, and the particular boots that I have, they're not bad, but they're actually not as good as the traditional mucklucks or winter moccasins that my friend Christine has. And so hers are leather on the outside, and you can see them all strapped up. And then inside that leather layer, the leather layer is fairly breathable, there is a felt liner. And so one of the nice things about having a removable felt liner is if your feet get a little sweaty, you can just basically take the sweaty or damp felt liners out, and you can dry them off and put another set in, and that really helps for you to stay warm. One of the other things is you'll see that the mucklucks go up a little further on your leg. So if you're in deep snow, if you don't have gaiters, which are kind of like coverings for your shins and your ankles, you're going to get snow coming up your leg and potentially even melting on your pants, depending on what you've got. So in our case, we're mixing and matching modern and traditional layers. I have some wind-resistant, water-resistant pants that are not bad. And then, my boots, of course, they're meant for winter. They're quite warm and they're quite flexible. But yeah, they're not as good as the winter moccasins. Here's a closer look at that fur ruff. So what this does is you can see the fibers of the fur, and I think this is coyote. I should say it's really important to talk openly about this, that for some indigenous communities, their hunting and trapping and fishing is not just a way of feeding their families and sustaining themselves, it's also part of their economy. So when they make products with fur and with leather, it's supporting their economy. So when you do it responsibly, and I know this is a nuanced thing, but when you do it responsibly, it can be done to help be a responsible steward for nature and for the environment. So, because I'm a very strong believer in being respectful and kind towards animals, but I also recognize that hunting, fishing, trapping can be a part of a healthy ecosystem. You just have to do it in a very responsible way. Now you'll see the fur ruff. You can see the fibers. What it does is it traps a pocket of air right by my face, and you can see the canvas anorak goes up, and so it's just a little pocket of warm air that keeps my skin from getting all that cold. If I wanted to, I could wear a number of different things. Like I'll often wear a buff, which I'll just pull up over, even over my nose, and that helps keep my skin warm. And then if I really want to, I can actually put on a pair of ski goggles, or even a layer that's almost like a full ski mask, and then the goggles over that. So there's several different things that I can do to add more protection in cold conditions. But in most conditions, and even down, I've been, tromping around in -40 and colder. This is actually a pretty good combination. Like I've got my layers under my anorak that are providing my warmth, and I'm always very mindful to have wool as the layer closest to my skin because it's really good at being hydrophobic and kind of pushing that moisture towards the outer layer so it can be dissipated. And I'll have my base layer, I'll have a mid layer, maybe even a warmer layer beyond that, and then of course the canvas to help break the wind and any precipitation that might be falling. So this is a good combination, helps keep me warm. In this case, we're going out for a hike, and you can see I've got my anorak, rather than belted up, I've got my anorak loose. And what that does is, as I'm walking, the anorak is swinging, kind of like a bell, and sort of puffing like a bellows. And what that does is it helps pump the warm air away from my body and the warm, moist air away from my body, and helps me keep me from overheating so I don't sweat too much. So that's a cool thing. And then maybe if I'm just getting started out and I'm not quite as warm, or if the conditions are a little different, I can just throw a belt on and close it up, and keep a pocket of warm air close to my body, just depending on what I'm doing. This is also one of the really nice things, is when you're out there in the wintertime, it's just beautiful. A day like today, there's a nice fresh dusting of snow, dappled sun through the trees. We could hear the birds chirping. It's just magical. And in this particular case, there was a little stream that was trickling through the woods. So it's really, really beautiful. I highly recommend checking it out. Next, I want to talk a little bit more about gear. So if you're car camping, of course, you can basically just drive right up to your parking spot and lift your gear right out of your trunk. But what happens if you're going a little further? In this case, I'm using a toboggan, and I have a kit actually made by a company. This one in particular is made by a company called Whiskey Jack, and I can unreservedly recommend their products. They're very well made, and they're a great company to deal with. So I throw the toboggan down, and I've got the square gray bag at the back. That's my wood stove. And because it's heavy, I'm holding the end of the toboggan down, because the toboggan's sort of natural inclination is to sort of curl up a little tiny bit. So I'm holding it down flat. And then I throw the tank bag. This is the great big bag that I've laid down flat. And I start tossing my gear onto the sled. I throw my hot tent down. I throw the poles for the hot tent down. I throw my chair down. I've got a gray bag with a bunch of tools and equipment that I'm going to need. And I've got, of course, you can see the wood stove bag holding down the back of the toboggan. So I load that all up, and then I flip the bag together, sort of close it up, and it just becomes like a big burrito. So let me show you that. So now what I've done is I've closed the tank, and I've cinched it up. I've got a nylon strap that goes zigzag, zigzag, zigzag all across the toboggan, going through loops. If you look toward just a little bit above the snow, right about the middle of the toboggan, you can see the loops that the strap weaves through. And this holds both the tank together. It kind of closes the two leaves of the tank and cinches them together, but then it also cinches the tank to the toboggan. And then what I do is I clip the top bag. This is the little sausage that's on top. That has other things in it. So what's nice about the top bag is there's a zipper, so I can get in and out throughout the day. So I'll have like a lighter jacket. I'll have maybe some food and snacks. I'll maybe have some water and things. And I've got some clothing and other things. Like oftentimes I keep my bedding in my top bag as well. And so I'll clip that. The top bag clips to the bottom bag, like paracord that runs the length of the toboggan, and I clip it to that. And so that just keeps everything together. I also have, I don't show it in this picture, but I have a curl bag that goes in the front curl of the toboggan. And so what I often have in there is my camera. Maybe if I'm not carrying my phone, I'll stuff it in there, but often I'll have my phone in my pocket just in case I want to snap some pictures without necessarily getting out my fancy camera. But yeah, whatever I need, extra gloves, extra mitts, maybe a hat, if I'm wearing my hat or not wearing my hat, I'll stuff it in there. And so yeah, I load this all up in the toboggan, and off I go. And pulling the toboggan, it's a little bit like pulling, for those of us who've had children, it feels a lot like that. Obviously my down quilt that I sleep on and a few other things are not all that heavy. The steel wood stove is obviously pretty heavy, and the hot tent itself is canvas. It's reasonably heavy, but most of the other stuff is fairly light. So it feels a lot like pulling a kid on a sled. Once I get to my campsite, one of the first things I do is I start assembling my flooring for my hot tent, and I set up my hot tent on top of it. So a lot of hot tents won't have a floor. So my hot tent doesn't have a floor, but what I do is I throw down a plastic RV mat. This is basically a plastic mat that people who have motorhomes, might set up in front, or maybe you've got something like this at your cottage, and maybe even set up an RV mat on your deck, on your deck at home or at your cottage. And so I use that as a base, and then I start building things up. So in the sort of the sleeping and living area of the hot tent, I'll set these big foam tiles. They're not heavy, but they're kind of a pain in the neck because they're bulky. So I'll set these on the floor. They're nice because they're non-slip. And so what it allows you to do is kind of walk around and you're not slipping on ice or snow. I wouldn't say they're super insulative, but they're certainly much warmer than stepping on, bare snow or ice with your foot. And then you can see in towards the bottom left of the picture, I've got some silicone mats. These are just silicone baking sheets that people often use for rolling up pies or cookies or these kinds of things. And I just have a couple of them layered underneath the wood stove. What this does, when combined with the fiberglass and silicone hearth mat, the yellow stripe thing that my wood stove is sitting on top, it slows down the heat transfer of my wood stove so it doesn't quite melt the snow and ice as quickly. And that helps slow down the rate in which I get a puddle forming. Because one of the things when your wood stove is belting out heat, it'll melt the snow and ice. And now sometimes your stove will sink. So it can be down 6 inches, 12 inches, etc., 20, 30 centimeters or more. By doing this, it slows the rate of melt, and sometimes actually it stops it completely, because if it's fairly cold and, say I'm on ice, any melt really doesn't accumulate. And then, of course, the moisture will actually flow through the RV mat, and kind of dissipate. So the reason why that's nice is actually also protects the RV mat. So there's no embers that fall on it and might melt it and damage it. Here's a closer look what it looks like around the wood stove. So you can see the shovel, that's my ash shovel. So if I'm in the same spot for a few days, I might get an accumulation of ash and coals. And so I'll shovel it out into a bucket and, go dump it into the fire ring or fire. There might be like a campfire ring that's set up for that campsite. And that way I can load up more wood, when I want to, if I want to, have dinner, have breakfast, or say I'm running the stove overnight in the coldest temperatures. There is an aluminum sort of multi-folding panel. What that does actually reflects heat in towards the tent. It also protects the side of the tent, the canvas, a little bit. I think the canvas would largely be fine. It's so cold outside, and there might be a little bit of snow and moisture on it that it's not going to burn. But it's kind of nice to extend the life of it by having this aluminum panel. And so the stove and the panel and some of my equipment around the stove were made by Boreal Outdoor Innovations. Luigi from there makes really cool stuff, and he's always experimenting and creating new and really useful things. I like the gear a lot. And actually you can see my wood stove, I've used it a ton, but it's still in excellent shape. It's got a little bit of patina, like that sort of color change, that sort of purpling a little bit. But after using it for multiple seasons, it's still got many, many seasons left to go. So that's one of the nice things. If you spend just a little bit more for the stainless steel, it'll last a lot longer. The other thing I'll point out is there's a silica reflective sheet suspended by long pins just underneath the wood stove. So if you look at the door, you'll see there's a bit of a screw that's kind of holding the bottom of the wood stove together. Just beneath that, there's something that looks like it's suspended. What that does is it reflects the heat back up at the stove. And so that too also slows down the amount of heat that gets transferred towards the ground, which slows the melting and the puddling. So I really appreciate that. It also makes for a more efficient burn. You want your stove to be in a sweet spot of just hot enough that the wood will burn efficiently, not so hot that you're going to damage the stove, and obviously not so cool that you're not getting an efficient burn and you're not getting a lot of heat out of your wood, not getting an efficient burn, and then creosote will build up. So the wood stove is all about the sweet spot. And so being able to reflect some of that heat back up allows you to get a more efficient burn a little more easily. And of course, this is what it's all about. You're out in the middle of nowhere and you've got a cozy home base. And so you can go in there and have your dinner, snacks, read your book, sleep, you're comfortable. And one of the nice things about a hot tent is you can actually dry things out. So if you've got liners in your boot, if you've got sweaters or base layers that get sweaty, you can just hang them up in the top of the tent. So while the sitting height within the tent is comfortable, often room temperature, maybe you'll run it a little cooler, a little warmer. The top of the tent is almost always very, very warm. And so you can dry things out up there, which is kind of nice, warm, dry out your gloves as well. So that's kind of nice. And so, yeah, you can do things like, skiing and snowshoeing and photography and all kinds of different activities. Just knowing you've got a nice place to return to warm up and get a nice hot meal. I mentioned we cook in the tent in the winter. So yeah, honestly, you can cook so many different things. You can, if you've got a pot and pan, I have multiple Dutch ovens. And so you can cook pizza and pie and cookies and breads in the Dutch oven. If you just want to go simple, sometimes we can do is dehydrate something at home and then rehydrate it, out in the field. I think one of the best parts for me about winter camping is being able to have really decadent, yummy meals cooking on the wood stove in the tent. It's a treat to be able to bring food and snacks in the hot tent. And this is us having breakfast, Sonia and I, and yeah, it was quite cozy and warm at that point. And one of the nice things you can see the sunshine shining through the canvas is just beautiful. It's just got a nice, warm, diffused light, so it's just really quite pleasant to hang out in there. So we were, yeah, just kind of goofing around and laughing and having a good time. That particular night, I think it got quite cold. I think we were down around -18 or colder. And so Tanya went from her shelter and joined me in mine. And yeah, we had to be disciplined not to keep laughing and giggling, but it was kind of nice. And I think the next night, my friend Christine joined. Sometimes we cook outside the tent. So in this particular case, I have this very large Dutch oven. I have, as I said, I have multiple Dutch ovens. I know probably makes me look weird, but they are quite useful. This one I affectionately call the hot tub for a small child. I routinely feed, 20, 30, 35 people with this Dutch oven. So I'll make a gigantic stew. And yeah, we just, in this case, we've got it over a fire ring, but you can cook it over, a rock open fire pit, no problem at all. You can even hang it if you want to lash together a tripod and sort of suspend it from there, and you can cook anything you want in that. And that's, of course, big enough that if you want, you could cook pies, buns, bread, you name it. You could do fried chicken if you wanted. It's amazing how versatile they are. Okay, I want to circle back to the what. And I say, well, what on earth do we do out there? Why go out there into the cold? And, is it boring? Are we just sitting there looking at each other, or what are we doing? We go for hikes. So this was a picture from one of the past Freezing Women events, and I'll talk about that more in a bit because it's kind of cool as well. And there was a group of us that, did a fairly long hike and, enjoyed the experience. Just the majestic beauty. So for this picture, this was at Silent Lake. The blue of the sky juxtaposed with the orange of the needles from the trees, with the white of the snow and the ice. Something about it I just thought was really neat. And the gray and the lichens of the rocks, it's just a really magical thing to look at. And also just the sense of depth. You can really sense, the space going off into the distance across the lake. There's another picture. Again, I like that. I forget who that was. That was one of my friends that there's about a handful of us that were at Silent Lake. And so they were just a little bit ahead of me, and we stopped to take some pictures. So this was nice. We was getting a little bit later in the day and long shadows and just really beautiful light. This picture was at Killarney. We did a hike through the park, and you can see just the sort of foothills of the La Cloche mountain range. And this is just looking across the lake. At that point, it was, of course, well frozen. But yeah, it's really pretty and nice to be out there. This was at Killbear. This was the morning after a big snowstorm. In the morning, the air was just nice and still, and it was sunny. The birds were chirping, and we broke a ski trail because there weren't a lot of people in the park. It was, I think, quite early in the season, and not a lot of people had been there yet. So we broke our own ski trail, and we were just having fun skiing around and snapping pictures and seeing things and just spending time together and getting exercise. So it's quite nice. This was on Crown Land, so we did a hike. I forget exactly how long it was, maybe about 45 minutes, maybe an hour and a half. It depends. I tend to be the slowpoke because I'm bringing up the rear, snapping pictures and recording video. But yeah, we went to see a waterfall, which was really nice and neat, and just the power of the rushing water and the fight against the water freezing and sort of accumulating against the water that's just trying to force its way through. It's quite neat. And then sometimes this was, I think it was either Freezing Woman 2 or Freezing Woman 3. I think it might have been 2. One of the participants brought their husky pups. And so they were absolutely adorable. So it's nice to see the fuzzy fuzzies out there. I have some pictures later on for some wildlife that's really neat to look at. So I like bringing my fancy camera with my zoom lens and getting to take neat pictures of wildlife. But I'll talk more about that in a minute. This was from that Crown Land trip that I mentioned earlier. So don't worry, I'm not actually standing as close to that rushing torrent of deep water. I'm actually standing where the footprints are, sort of on the rocks. But it's neat. It's neat, actually. just the textures of the rushing water and the sound of the rushing water was kind of neat. So I did a video of this as well, but the pictures are kind of nice to look at. Oh, this one was also on that Crownland trip. I wanted to mention, so one of the neat things about the lakes is when the lakes freeze over, they kind of become like the highways. So they're just a little bit icy, and you can pull your sled across it, or you can walk across it quite easily. It's a little easier than going, up and down and up and down over the rocks and the train on land. And so this was just a way to show that. So you can really cover a lot of distance fairly quickly. If you're using, snowshoes or skis, or there's other equipment as well that can help you if the snow is a little bit deep. But in this particular case, the snow is fairly hard packed, and so you could cover ground, cover cover ice fairly quickly and cover distance fairly quickly. This was Silent Lake as well, so quite pretty. Again, the sun. This is just looking the other way, sort of more into the sun rather than away from the sun. This is the famous windswept tree in Kildare. In this picture, Sheila was facing away from the wind and the snow, just to try to make it a little bit more bearable. It was very, very cold with the wind whipping off the Georgian Bay and Lake Huron. But yeah, the light, as you can see, was really gloomy and ominous. It just felt like the world was ending, but made for a really cool picture. Let me talk about why, one more reason why you would do this. So we talked about, no bugs, no crowds, it's quiet, it's really peaceful, you get exercise, the camaraderie, the community. I really like seeing the animals and birds. So a lot of you, like we have here where I live, we've got chickadees, but it's nice getting out there in the wintertime, and you can get these really incredible pictures. I like about this one is just the eye contact. If you see the eye, it's looking right at me. Squirrels, same thing, kind of hanging out. There's something about the winter. I guess the animals and birds are a little bit less afraid of us. So, you can kind of get up close and get a really amazing shot of them. This was a turkey, or was a turkey. Hopefully it still is a turkey. I have no idea. But this was a male turkey, and male turkeys, I'm sure many of you know, they can actually get quite aggressive. So this one kept coming towards me and towards me and towards me and being really aggressive. And now, of course, being a photographer, I'm like, no problem, get closer. This is great. I'm snapping pictures. And eventually, it got super close to me and kind of veered off, because it's like, wait a second, you're not running away in terror like everybody else does. They're quite big. Like, so they're bigger than a good number of dogs, and certainly well bigger than a cat. So they are kind of daunting, and they can be quite aggressive at this point in time. It's just neat to see one up close. I don't think I'd ever seen one quite this close before. This is a pine marten, and if you look really close, you'll see its murderous teeth. And I don't know why, but for some reason, every time I look at this, I imagine it talks like Austin Powers. It goes, yeah, baby. They're very zoomy, so they were zipping really quickly, through the trees, the branches of the trees, through the snow. And I just managed to catch this one in a moment where it was kind of huffing and puffing, and I managed to snap a shot of it. So pretty cool picture. There was a baby pine marten up in the tree, so I just missed focus on the baby pine marten. My camera focused on the stick instead. But as you can see, it's a cute little puffball, and it was adorable. So I count this as sort of almost got a picture of it. It was really cool to see. So just in the heading towards wrapping things up, who would do this? Why would we talked about what this is and how to do it. Let's talk about who would do this. And I'll talk about it with an example, kind of a fun little thing. So this picture, we were all a group of strangers. I don't think any of us had met each other before. I think it's possible that Kathy, who's taking the selfie, and Fiona in the back with the sort of yellow/orange toque might have met each other before, but we all met online and decided originally we were going to go and do a backcountry trip near Algonquin. We were talking about various places, including Provoking Lake. We watched the weather forecast, and it just kept getting colder and colder. So sort of like, -10 to -13 to -16. And we're like, uh-oh. So eventually we decided to pull the pin on that, and I booked Mew Lake, a site in Mew Lake Campground. And so you can see our cold tents, sort of set up in a semicircle around that campsite. I'm pretty sure Kathy hammock camped in that first one. So you can see her tarp, sort of, it actually goes right down to the ground. So it's almost like a big tent off to the left there. So it ended up being really cold, minus 25-ish. And so really, quite character building, but we had a good time. And actually a lot of us went on trips together again and again and again over the years. It's a great way to build up friendships. So that's how, we started. Of course, at that point in time, that was just a trip. Didn't really think much of it, but the word spread, and we decided to go back again. And the next year, I think I did call it Freezing at that point. So yeah, I organized a second one and had a few more people came. And then the year after, a few more people came. And then the year after that, a few more people came. And then a year after that, even more still. And this past November, we had 300 of us. So this is a picture of a tiny fraction of the crowd. But yeah, this is an event called Freezing. And what's really cool about it is it's an event where very experienced winter campers, very experienced campers and trippers and canoers and backpackers get to hang out with newcomers. And it's a very approachable trip. It's a great way to learn about winter camping and all of the other activities out there. It's an event because there's so many people that are camping in so many different ways. You'll see cold tents and hot tents and people sleeping under tarps, people who have converted a vehicle and added heaters and insulation and all kinds of really cool stuff. It's a really great chance to learn. And one of the best part about it is we make friendships and we go on a bunch of other smaller trips. So it's kind of like I guess an on-ramp event for a much broader community and ecosystem of people that are doing things. And so Freezing Woman 7 is coming up. So you can find us in a number of different places. So you can Google search Freezing Woman. You can search on Facebook. You can search on Instagram. There is a site called Ripples and Leaves. So ripplesandleaves.ca, where you can sign up to the mailing list. You can join the discussion forum. You can find more information about Freezing Woman, how to winter camp, all of that. So yeah, it's really nice to be able to meet people, make friends, a springboard to all kinds of other events and activities and friendships that that hopefully last over time. So that's it. Now, in this particular presentation I'm recording, I'm going to put this up on YouTube. And if you have any questions, please feel free to comment. And I'd be delighted to answer them to you. Thank you.